In 1922, the up-and-coming naval architect William Francis Gibbs was tasked with his most ambitious project yet. For years, Gibbs dreamed of building an American superliner that would rival the great ships of Europe. Instead, he would be tasked with refurbishing the second largest ship in the world, the German SS Vaterland. Gibbs' work on the project would be lauded as a great success, but the SS Leviathan would go on to prove an abject failure that nearly doomed Gibbs' hopes of ever building a great American superliner of his own. From the moment Kaiser Wilhelm II, grandson of Queen Victoria, attended Britain's Spithead Naval Review and marveled at the White Star Line's RMS Teutonic in 1889, he dreamed that the German Empire would one day build passenger liners that would outclass those of the United Kingdom. Essentially, the Kaiser was jealous of his grandmother and cousin's big fancy ships, so he decided to build his own. This one-upsmanship would ignite the rapid advancement in naval building that would produce ever larger and grander ocean liners, as well as a tense geopolitical climate that would eventually put their nations at war. 8 years later, the North German Lloyd Line's 14,000-ton four-stacker SS Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse took the blue ribbon from Cunard's RMS Lucania. Germany would hold the record for the next decade with Hamburg America Line's SS Deutschland and later North German Lloyd Line's SS Kaiser Wilhelm II. I'm noticing a naming pattern. With these ships, the Kaiser had the prestige he wanted, but Britain would eventually claw the blue ribbon back with RMS Lusitania in 1907. Her sister Mauretania would go on to hold the record for the next 20 years. Between the speed of Cunard's Lusitania class and the size and luxury of White Star Line's upcoming Olympic class, Germany was in danger of losing its tenuous foothold on the North Atlantic passenger market that they fought so hard to gain. A new set of record-breaking liners was needed. The big ship battle was on. In 1886, Albert Ballin joined the Hamburg America Line as head of their passenger department. He quickly rose to a leadership position in the company by the turn of the century. Ballin was a genius, fanatically devoted to the company and the national goal of advancing Germany's merchant naval might. He recognized that in order to compete, they would need a trio of liners that would enable a weekly express service. The Kaiser eagerly agreed. The first of this trio was the SS Imperator, laid down in 1910 and launched on May 23, 1912, just over a month after the sinking of the RMS Titanic. At 52,117 tons, she was the largest passenger ship in the world. The second liner in the Imperator class was laid down in September 1911 at Blumenwas in Hamburg. Designated hold number 212, the new liner was to be larger than her sister and featured a number of improvements over the Imperator. The new ship was launched on April 3, 1913, in a ceremony led by Ruprecht, Crown Prince of Bavaria. The new liner was given the nationalistic name SS Vaterland, the German word for fatherland. At 53,500 tons, the SS Vaterland was the largest ship in the world. Her older sister, the SS Imperator, was proving a success with passengers, despite flaws in her construction that led to major stability issues, earning her the incredible nickname L'Imperator. But most of these issues were resolved for the SS Vaterland. The liner had an overall length of 950 feet or 290 meters, with a beam of just over 100 feet or 30.5 meters. She was powered by 46 coal-fired water tube boilers that drove 4 steam turbines, achieving a maximum speed of 26 knots and a service speed of 23 knots. This exceeded Olympic's 21 knots, but fell just short of the speed required to challenge Mauretania's record. But the real showstopper was the Vaterland's lavish interiors, which were similar to the Imperator's, but with some key improvements. While Imperator's funnel casings followed the traditional path through the center of the ship, just like those on the Olympic and Mauretania, the Vaterland's casings were split to run up the sides of the ship. This allowed sweeping public rooms that could run uninterrupted from one end of the ship to the other. As with many previous Ballon liners, famed designer Charles Mevis was in charge of her interiors. Like her older sister, Vaterland was given a grand Ritz-Carlton restaurant on her lounge deck that replicated the famous hotel restaurant in New York. The grand oval-shaped room flowed seamlessly into her spacious winter garden, and then to her grand open foyer, which contained her grand staircase and lifts. This opened up to her palatial social hall that featured a large raised stage in the place occupied by the center funnel casing on the Imperator. Another feature was her grand swimming pool, which spanned 2 decks and was decorated with large marble columns and accents, significantly more palatial than the British competition. She also boasted 2 massive Kaiser suites that featured 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, breakfast room, a private veranda, ensuite bathrooms, and a service pantry. Though the Imperator class was only a few thousand tons larger than the Aquitania and the Olympic class, and shared a similar rectilinear exterior design, the Imperator, and especially the Vaterland, gave a greater impression of size due to her bulky, towering superstructure. The Titanic disaster was still a very recent memory, and a number of safety measures were installed to accommodate the ship's intended capacity of 4,050 passengers and 1,200 crew. She was equipped with a powerful spotlight that could be used to spot icebergs, though it's doubtful that this really would have made any difference. More meaningfully, she was equipped with 83 lifeboats, more than enough to accommodate everyone on board. Ballon paid particular attention to the ship's third-class accommodations. Immigration was still a major business at the time. He knew that if lower-class passengers had a pleasant crossing, they would write to their family and friends back in Europe and tell them what a joy it was to cross with the Hamburg America Line. The SS Vaterland sailed her maiden voyage on May 14, 1914, only a few weeks before Cunard's RMS Aquitania. She was truly the culmination of the North Atlantic building race that defined the turn of the century. She was the largest, most palatial liner passengers could sail on, a testament to Ballon's obsessive dedication. But she was ultimately only able to complete a tiny handful of voyages before war broke out only a couple of months later. With the North Atlantic now a war zone, the Hamburg America Line feared that it would be too dangerous to bring their flagship home. They chose instead to keep the liner laid up in their terminal in Hoboken, New Jersey, in the neutral United States. This would prove to be a mistake. The Vaterland remained laid up in Hoboken for 3 years as the war raged on and the United States remained officially neutral. Large portions of the population didn't think that it was wise to enter into what was seen as just another European war, but many in power, including President Woodrow Wilson, were eager to enter the war on the side of the Allied powers. While many British liners were requisitioned to serve the war effort, the RMS Lusitania continued to offer passenger services. On May 7, 1915, she was torpedoed by a German U-boat, killing 1,198 passengers and crew, including 128 American citizens. Germany's policy of unrestricted submarine warfare played a major role in turning public sentiment against Germany and the Kaiser. But the United States remained neutral as the war dragged on. Then, in January 1917, a secret communication supposedly sent by the German Foreign Office to Mexico, known as the Zimmermann telegram, was intercepted and decoded by British intelligence. The communication proposed a military alliance between Germany and Mexico if the United States entered the war, and promised to return Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico in exchange. The telegram ignited a firestorm in the United States, and Congress voted to declare war on Germany on April 6, 1917. The Vaterland, along with numerous other German liners laid up in American ports, were immediately seized. When the United States Shipping Board took possession of the Vaterland, they found that she was one of the only ships not to have her engines and equipment damaged or destroyed by her German crew. It was said they couldn't bring themselves to destroy their beloved ship. They were sent to an internment camp in Hot Springs, North Carolina, where many of them died of typhoid fever in the summer of 1918. Though she escaped sabotage, the years of inactivity left her in desperate need of repairs in order to bring her back into operation. She was turned over to the Navy in June 1917 for conversion to a troop ship. Obviously, the name Vaterland would not be suitable. President Woodrow Wilson was asked what the new name should be. He responded by saying, "Why, that's easy. Leviathan. It's in the Bible. Monster of the deep." The USS Leviathan's size and speed would be a key asset to the US war effort. She made 10 round trips between Hoboken and Brest, France, at first carrying 7,000 to 10,000 troops per voyage. Later, a warm bunk system was introduced in which soldiers would take turns sharing bunks. This practice raised her capacity to an astonishing 14,000 troops per voyage. She was also given a custom dazzle paint scheme to help camouflage her from German U-boats. By the time the armistice was signed on November 11, 1918, she had completed 10 round-trip voyages and transported 120,000 troops to the war in Europe. After the armistice, she underwent a minor overhaul and was painted gray. She would sail 9 more voyages, repatriating US soldiers, and finished her last voyage on September 8, 1919. On October 29, 1919, she was decommissioned and handed over to the US Shipping Board, and was laid up in Hoboken while her new owners debated what to do with their great German sea monster. The United States retained ownership of the Leviathan under the Treaty of Versailles. On December 17, 1919, the International Mercantile Marine, IMM for short, signed a contract to oversee her conversion back to a passenger liner for the United States. Initial bids for the project were too high, and the project was delayed to wait for a more favorable bid. To complicate the project further, the original blueprints were not turned over by the Germans under the treaty. The Germans demanded $1 million for the plans, which was considered outrageous. Instead, a new set of plans were drawn up from scratch. The project was eventually transferred from the IMM to Gibbs Brothers, later known as Gibbs & Cox. The company was led by famed naval architect William Francis Gibbs, who was eager to grow his new company and commission his own American superliner. The project would be an opportunity to prove his new company and help establish America's role in the North Atlantic passenger trade. In late 1921, a new bid for the project from the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Virginia was accepted for $6,135,575. The Leviathan began her 14-month conversions in April 1922. The refit would convert her boilers from coal to oil. Her hull was strengthened, and her wiring and plumbing were completely replaced. Her interior conversions were led by New York architects Walker and Gillette, though most of her lavish original designs were maintained. Her paint was also updated, giving her patriotic red, white, and blue funnels. Upon completion, her size increased to 59,956 tons, and her speed averaged 27.48 knots. The Americans calculated tonnage differently from the British, and would go on to heavily advertise that the Leviathan was the largest and fastest ship in the world. This was, of course, not true. The Mauretania still maintained the speed record, and Leviathan's younger sister Bismarck, now the White Star Line's Majestic, was slightly larger. The Leviathan was operated by the newly founded United States Lines, who were contractually obligated to run at least 5 round-trip voyages per season. The line was established to operate the many German liners seized by the United States after the war. The Leviathan's maiden voyage as an American liner departed on July 4, 1923. A very patriotic choice of date. The Leviathan was immediately popular early in her career, but her success would be short-lived. In 1924, the Leviathan was rocked by a massive storm on the North Atlantic. She was battered by 90-foot waves and winds that reached over 100 miles per hour. At times, the massive ship rolled up to 20 degrees. The storm smashed 11 portholes and injured 32 passengers. But her sound engineering and construction held up well, and she emerged with only superficial damage and a handful of terrified passengers. The transatlantic shipping trade changed significantly in the 1920s when the Immigration Act of 1924 greatly reduced the number of people allowed to immigrate to the United States. The Leviathan had two major factors playing against her. The first was the prohibition of alcohol passed in the United States in 1920. The act mandated that U.S. registered ships were considered U.S. territory and were barred from serving alcohol on board, making them into what was referred to as dry ships. This put the Leviathan at a major disadvantage in the saturated transatlantic market because, well, people really like to drink on ships, especially Americans eager to escape prohibition. It didn't hurt that she had two nearly identical copies operated by Cunard and the White Star Line that both served alcohol, came with the prestige of their long-established British operators, and were generally known to have a fun, party-like atmosphere on board. Leviathan became known as the more buttoned-up of the three, appealing to older, more conservative travelers. But all of this was minor compared to the second issue that plagued the Leviathan. Without any running mates that could match her size and speed, the Leviathan could only offer a monthly transatlantic service. The Cunard Line and White Star Line each had their own trio of express liners. The Mauretania, Berengaria, and Aquitania for Cunard, and the Olympic, Majestic, and Homeric for the White Star Line. This allowed both lines to offer a weekly express service to New York. For many, when it came time to book passage, the United States lines wouldn't even come to mind, and if it did, travelers usually had to wait weeks to set sail. The Leviathan was also massive and expensive. The inexperienced United States lines were ill-equipped to operate such a complex liner. The company accumulated massive amounts of debt through the 1920s. The stock market crash of 1929 made the situation considerably worse, and the company ended up being sold and restructured a number of times. By the 1930s, the Leviathan was seen as a major burden for the company, and they demanded that the US government either retake the ship or provide subsidies for her operation. Since 1929, she had lost $75,000 per trip, but the situation only got worse. In 1933, the government stipulated the Leviathan had to remain in service and complete another 5 round trips. She underwent a $150,000 refurbishment. In the following 1934 season, she lost another $143,000 sailing barely half full. Finally, the line paid $500,000 to the US government to allow them to retire the liner everyone now saw as a giant money pit. She was maintained until 1936 and was finally sold for scrap in 1937. On January 26, 1938, she sailed her final voyage to the scrapyard in Scotland, though her scrapping was delayed by World War II and wouldn't be completed until 1946. The Leviathan carried 250,000 passengers under the United States lines and never made a profit for her owners. Despite early promise and optimism, she ultimately came to be seen as a failure and convinced many that superliners should be left to the Europeans. William Francis Gibbs was praised for his work on the project, but the failure delayed any hope of a new American superliner until after World War II, when Gibbs would finally get the opportunity to build his great American liner. The SS Leviathan is a fascinating missed opportunity, and it's hard not to imagine what would have happened if her career wasn't hampered by war. The Ballon Trio, if operated as intended, would undoubtedly have given a great deal of competition to the British liners. The Vaterland was the culmination of the race to build ever larger and more lavish liners. She was a beautiful marriage of pre-war opulence and innovation. Her American owners failed to let her shine, but in the end, circumstances sealed her fate. Ultimately, the one-upsmanship that created her led to the war that turned her over to a foreign power and destroyed the world she was designed for. Nevertheless, she was a marvel that deserves her place in history. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, support the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.